September 19, 1944. 2:47 p.m. Outside Arracourt, France. Oberfeldwebel Hans Becker presses his face against the Panther's periscope, scanning the tree line 3 kilometers distant. His gunner has just sent another Sherman to its grave, the second one this afternoon. Through the optics, Becker watches the American tank burn. Black smoke pours from the open hatches. 3 crewmen scramble away from the hull, sprinting for cover. Range 1,200 meters, his gunner reports, satisfaction evident in his voice. Clean penetration, they never had a chance. Becker allows himself a thin smile. The Panther's 75mm gun is a masterpiece. Longer barrel, higher velocity, devastating at range. The American's 75mm rounds bounce off his glacis plate like pebbles. His frontal armor is essentially invulnerable to anything they can throw at him. A third Sherman appears at the tree line, attempting to flank. "Target, 11 o'clock!" Becker calls out. His crew moves with practiced efficiency. The turret traverses. The gunner acquires. The loader rams home another round. "Fire!" The Panther rocks backward. Through the smoke, Becker sees the Sherman erupt in flames. 3, the loader says, marking another kill on the turret interior. 3 this afternoon. Radio chatter confirms the company's success. 8 Sherman kills total in this engagement. 15 yesterday, 23 the day before. The Americans are bleeding tanks. Becker's loader poses the question that's been nagging at him all week. Don't they ever run out? Becker doesn't answer immediately. He's watching the American lines through his periscope, and something doesn't add up. Yesterday morning, his company destroyed 12 Shermans in this exact sector. Verified kills. Smoking hulls left on the field. This morning's reconnaissance counted 15 Shermans in defensive positions ahead. The math doesn't work. Either American reinforcements are arriving faster than intelligence suggests, or something else is happening. Something that makes his stomach tighten despite the afternoon's victories. What Becker doesn't know, what he can't know from inside his steel fortress, is that the Shermans his company destroyed yesterday morning were already back in action by yesterday afternoon. Repaired, rearmed, and crewed by men who'd walked away from those burning hulls with nothing more than singed eyebrows and wounded pride. The graveyard is real. The Americans are dying. But it's not where the Germans think it is. Let's talk about the Panther. On paper, it's a masterpiece, the product of German engineering obsession and hard lessons learned on the Russian front. 80 millimeters of frontal armor set at a 55-degree slope. Do the trigonometry and you're looking at effective protection equivalent to over 140 millimeters of vertical steel. The American Sherman's 75mm gun cannot penetrate this armor. Not at 1,000 meters, not at 500 meters, not even at point-blank range if the shot hits that glacis plate straight on. The Panther's own gun, the 75mm KWK-42L70, is a different beast entirely. Longer barrel, higher muzzle velocity. At 2,000 meters, it can punch through a Sherman's frontal armor like it's made of cardboard. The Germans know this. Their tankers know this. When the Panther first rolled into combat at Kursk in summer 1943, German commanders believed they'd found the answer to the Soviet T-34. By summer 1944, when Panthers arrive in France to face the Allied invasion, that confidence has solidified into certainty. General Fritz Bayerlein, commanding Panzer Lehr Division in Normandy, experiences this firsthand on July 11, 1944. His Panther regiment engages American forces near Le Désert. The 57mm anti-tank guns the Americans are using. They bounce off the Panther's frontal armor like thrown rocks. The Americans have to maneuver, wait for side shots, ambush from concealment, play every trick in the book just to have a chance. Because in a straight fight at range, the Panther dominates. American tank crews learn this the hard way. A Sherman commander from the 2nd Armored Division describes his first encounter with a Panther outside Caen. We hit him 3 times at 800 yards. All 3 rounds sparked off his front plate. He fired once, penetrated our turret, killed my gunner. We bailed out. The math is brutal. Sherman M4A3, weight 33 tons, frontal armor 51mm at 47 degrees, effective armor 75mm, gun 75mm M3 L40, penetration at 500 yards, 68mm Panther AOSFG, weight 45 tons, frontal armor 80mm at 55 degrees, effective 144mm, gun 75mm K42 L70, penetration at 500 yards, 100mm. The Panther can kill a Sherman from ranges where the Sherman can't even hurt it. This is what confidence looks like. This is what German superiority feels like. But the specifications don't tell the whole story. What they don't show is the Achilles heel hidden in those impressive numbers. A weakness that doesn't appear on any technical diagram. A flaw that will cost Germany the war. The Panther looks perfect, on paper. June 18, 1944, maintenance report, Panzer Lehr Division, Normandy. Of 42 Panthers that departed assembly area at 0600 hours, 31 reached the combat zone. 11 broke down en route. Of the 31 that reached combat, 4 suffered final drive failure within first hour of engagement. 2 suffered transmission failure. 3 had engine fires. By nightfall, 18 Panthers operational. This isn't an outlier, this is normal. There's a war happening that doesn't show up in after-action reports. A war fought not with guns but with wrenches, not with tactics but with maintenance schedules, not with valor but with spare parts. The Americans are winning this war. The Germans don't even realize they're fighting it. General Paul Hauser, commanding German 7th Army in Normandy, provides the brutal assessment. During long movements to the battle area, 20 to 30% of all tanks fall out due to mechanical failures. Read that again. Up to a third of German armor doesn't even reach the battlefield. Of those that do, Hauser continues, regarding the remaining tanks, 15% are lost through mechanical failures. Not enemy fire, mechanical failures. A British technical officer examining knocked-out German tanks writes, in the last year of the war, there was a very high percentage of failures due partly to flaws in production, partly to bad driving, itself the result of inadequate training, and partly to the breakdown of railways which compelled tanks to travel on their own tracks. My impression is that availability was affected more by mechanical unserviceability than by battle losses. The Panther's problem started its conception. Hitler demanded more armor during development. The combat weight climbed from 25 tons to over 45 tons. But the powertrain had been designed for a lighter vehicle. The transmission, the final drives, the suspension, all stressed beyond their design limits. The Panther is front-heavy. The weight distribution puts enormous strain on the front final drives. These drives are made of low-grade steel, Germany's material shortages biting deep by 1944. They fail constantly. When the Panther first saw combat at Kursk in July 1943, the operational rate was catastrophic, 16%. Only 1 in 6 Panthers was combat-ready at any given time. The Germans institute a crash program, rebuild existing tanks, improve the powertrain, introduce the Panther AOSF, with modifications. By December 1943, the operational rate climbs to 37%, still appalling. By February 1944, 50%. By May 1944, 78%. This is the improved version. At its best, 1 in 4 Panthers is still broken down. Compare this to the Sherman, an American armored division in France, autumn 1944. Tanks that have been in continuous combat since Normandy. Odometers reading over 1,000 miles, enough distance to cripple a Panther several times over. Operational rate, 91%. The difference isn't luck, it's philosophy. The U.S. Army Ground Forces under General Leslie McNair established a doctrine called battle worthiness. Before any tank entered production, it had to prove reliability through exhaustive testing. No exceptions, no shortcuts. Ordnance Department engineers constantly tried to push new, untested designs into production. McNair blocked them, every time. The Sherman underwent more rigorous testing than any tank in the war. Durability wasn't an afterthought, it was the foundation. A post-war Chrysler Corporation report captures the philosophy. Our tanks were better because the Germans never learned to think in terms of reliability as we use the word. That is, maximum performance with minimum care and replacement. A weakness for technical prowess at the expense of dependability, simplicity, and cost is shared by many American engineers, but in this practical nation, the engineer is disciplined by the production man and the salesman. The Germans built engineering marvels. The Americans built workhorses. And in a war of attrition, workhorses win. But reliability alone doesn't explain what's happening in France. There's another factor, one that terrifies German commanders more than any gun or armor specification. The factor is hidden in the supply depots, in the workshops behind the lines, in the repair battalions that work through the night. The Americans aren't just building reliable tanks, they're building a system that makes those tanks nearly immortal. December 1944, Intelligence Assessment, Wehrmacht West, Operational Panther strength in the Western Theater, approximately 500 tanks. Operational Sherman strength in the same theater, over 5,000 tanks. 10-1. The numbers are staggering, but they tell only part of the story. Sherman production in 1943 peaked at over 2,000 tanks per month. By 1944, production has been deliberately reduced, not because of capability, but because there are enough Shermans already. The United States is swimming in tanks. Panther production in 1944 peaks at 350 tanks per month. The Wehrmacht needs 600 Panthers per month just to replace combat losses and maintain strength. They're producing at 60% of minimum requirements. This is a math problem with only one solution: eventual defeat. But the production numbers, as dire as they are, still don't capture the full picture. Because production is only half the equation. The other half is battlefield retention. An American infantry division in France has a permanently attached tank battalion. 54 medium tanks. These tanks provide direct fire support, breakthrough capability, and mobile firepower that dramatically increases the division's combat power. A German infantry division? If they're lucky, they get a company of assault guns, maybe 17 vehicles, often less. The combat power differential is enormous. Colonel Bruce Clark, one of the U.S. Army's finest tank commanders in the war, cuts through the mythology. Most American tankers would have preferred to be sitting in a more powerful tank like the Panther, but no commander would have been content to substitute his many Shermans for a much smaller number of Panthers. This is the brutal calculus of industrial warfare. One perfect tank cannot offer the same combat power as 10 adequate tanks. The Germans never understood this. They pursued technical excellence at the expense of everything else. Complexity over simplicity, performance over reliability, quality over quantity. Albert Speer, Germany's armaments minister, fights this battle throughout the war. He begs for standardization, simplified designs, longer production runs. Focus on a few good weapons instead of dozens of experimental types. He loses. Hitler and the Wehrmacht demand continuous improvement. New models, better specifications. The perfect Panzer. The result? Germany produces approximately 6,000 Panthers during the entire war. The United States produces over 49,000 Shermans. Even accounting for multiple theaters, the math is insurmountable. But here's what really keeps German commanders awake at night. The Americans don't just have more tanks. They keep the tanks they have running. They repair damaged tanks. They recover knocked-out hulls and rebuild them. They salvage parts from total losses and use them to fix repairable vehicles. A Panther that throws a track in combat is often abandoned. German recovery vehicles are scarce. Spare parts are scarce. Trained mechanics are scarce. A Sherman that throws a track, repaired within hours. Back in action the same day. A Panther with a failed transmission, sent to depot for complete overhaul if it can be recovered. Otherwise destroyed by its crew to prevent capture. A Sherman with a failed transmission, replacement transmission installed by battalion maintenance within 24 hours. This is the invisible superiority. The Americans have built something the Germans cannot match, a system that keeps fighting machines in the fight. And in September 1944, at a small French town called Arracourt, the system proves itself in the crucible of the largest tank battle on the Western Front since Normandy. September 20th, 1944, ordnance collecting point 12 kilometers behind American lines. Sergeant Mike Torres stands in a field of wounded steel. 43 Sherman tanks in various states of damage, some with penetration holes you could put your fist through, some missing tracks, some with blown engines, some burned so badly the paint has bubbled off the turrets. Torres is an ordnance maintenance supervisor. This is his kingdom. That one, he points to an M4A3 with a penetration through the sponson. Track replacement, new bogey wheel, patch the hole, check the ammunition storage. 6 hours work, maybe 8. His assistant makes notes on a clipboard. That one, Torres continues, indicating a tank with its turret traversed hard to the left, one track blown completely off. Transmission took a hit. We've got a replacement. Pull the old one, install new, replace the track. 12 hours if we start now, have it ready by morning. They move down the line. Torres's experienced eye categorizes each vehicle with ruthless efficiency. Minor damage, repair at collecting point, return to unit within 24 hours. Moderate damage, move to ordnance battalion workshop, return to unit within 3 to 5 days. Heavy damage, cannibalize for parts, use the Hulk for spare armor plate. This isn't improvisation, this is doctrine. The U.S. Army has built a 3-tier maintenance system that functions like an assembly line in reverse. Every level has clear responsibilities, trained personnel, specialized equipment, and abundant spare parts. Tier 1, unit maintenance, the tank crew and the battalion mechanics handle daily upkeep, minor repairs, track maintenance, weapons cleaning. They can swap an engine in the field if they have to. Many crews become expert mechanics out of necessity and pride. Tier 2, Ordnance Battalion Workshops. Mobile repair facilities positioned just behind the combat zone. Staffed with specialized mechanics, welders, electricians. They handle battle damage repair, component replacement, armor patching. They work around the clock. Shift rotations ensure 24-hour operations. Tier 3, depot-level maintenance, far behind the lines. Complete overhauls, major rebuilds, modification programs. This is where damaged tanks get new lives. But the genius of the system isn't the structure, it's the speed. A Sherman takes a hit in the morning fight. The crew bails out. The tank sits on the battlefield smoking. By noon, a recovery vehicle has dragged it back to the ordnance collecting point. By 2 p.m., Torres has assessed the damage, penetration through the hull side, ammunition fire suppressed before spreading, engine intact, transmission intact, suspension intact. By 4 p.m., his team is at work, cutting away damaged plate, welding patches, replacing the destroyed ammunition rack, testing systems. By midnight, the tank is operational. By dawn, it's back with its unit. New crew, same tank, ready to fight. The Germans call this impossible. Their own experience says a tank hit by anti-tank fire is gone for weeks if it survives at all. But the Americans aren't just repairing tanks faster. They're doing something even more revolutionary. February 1945, Belgian factory near Bastogne. The factory had been producing agricultural equipment before the war. Plows, harrows, seed drills. Now it produces armor. 3 M4A3 Shermans sit in the work bays. Crews of Belgian welders swarm over them, acetylene torches blazing. They're attaching additional armor plate to the tank's frontal glacis and turrets. The armor comes from knocked-out tanks, both American and German. The Ardennes battlefield, that frozen killing ground from December, has been picked clean. Every wrecked tank and assault gun stripped for usable armor plate. Lieutenant Colonel James Harper from Patton's 3rd Army Ordnance Section watches the work with satisfaction. "How long?" he asks the factory foreman. "This batch? 6 to 8 hours per tank. We have 3 teams working in rotation. We can process 9 tanks per day, weather permitting. 6 to 8 hours to give a Sherman significantly better protection. Protection that might mean the difference between a penetration that kills the crew and a hit that just knocks off the applique armor." This is General Patton's answer to the Sherman's vulnerability problem. After the Battle of the Bulge, Patton demanded better armor for his tanks. His ordnance officers initially resisted. They were overworked, understaffed, fighting just to keep existing tanks running. Patton's response was typical. "I don't care how you do, it find a way." They found 3 Belgian factories near Bastogne, civilian facilities converted to military use. The ordnance battalions provided technical specifications, welding training, quality control. The factories provided the manpower and facilities. The source material? The battlefield itself. There are hundreds of knocked-out tanks littering Belgium and France, American Shermans destroyed by German guns, German Panthers and Panzers destroyed by American guns. Every single one is a treasure trove of armor plate. Ordnance recovery teams scour the battlefields. They bring cutting equipment. They remove intact armor plates from destroyed hulls. They transport this salvaged armor to the factories. The factories cut the armor to specification, drill mounting holes, weld brackets. The tanks arrive in the morning. By evening, they're up-armored and gone. 3 armored divisions receive the upgrade, the 4th, 6th, and 11th, an average of 36 tanks per division. Not every tank, there isn't time or material for that, but enough to give each unit a core of better protected vehicles. A tanker from the 6th Armored Division experiences the value firsthand. His M4A3E8, fitted with the applique armor in February, takes a direct hit from a German 75mm gun. The additional armor plate is knocked clean off, but the hull beneath is not penetrated. His crew survives. They continue fighting. That night, the Ordnance Battalion welds the armor back on, but the factory program is just one piece of the larger picture. The real revolution is happening at the ordnance collecting points, in the workshops, in the depot facilities scattered across France and Belgium. The Americans have created something unprecedented, a system that denies the enemy the satisfaction of killing their tanks permanently. A British study from Normandy provides the grim statistics of Sherman tanks knocked out by German fire, 75% burn after penetration. The ammunition catches fire, the tank becomes an inferno. But here's what the study also reveals. On average, only 1 crewman dies per tank lost to enemy fire, usually the crewman closest to the point of penetration. The rest of the crew? They bail out, 30 seconds from hit to escape before the ammunition cooks off. Most crews become expert at this survival drill. These men, trained, experienced, battle-hardened, are the most valuable resource in an armored division, more valuable than the tanks themselves. They walk back to their unit. They're given replacement tanks. The tanks come from the ordnance collecting points where Sergeant Torres and thousands like him are performing resurrection miracles daily. The Germans are killing tanks. The Americans are rebuilding them faster than they can be destroyed. It's not a graveyard, It's a recycling center, and the Germans are starting to notice. August 1944, Normandy hedgerow country. Private First Class Eddie Walsh stares at the sandbags stacked on his Sherman's glacis plate and has a thought. This is either going to save my life or kill me faster. The sandbags were his crew's idea. They'd watched too many Panzerfaust rockets tear through Sherman armor. The German infantry's shoulder-fired anti-tank weapons had become a nightmare in the close terrain of the bocage. Shermans couldn't keep their distance. Every hedgerow might hide a German soldier with a rocket. So Walsh's crew started stacking sandbags, 2 layers thick across the front, secured with wire and rope. It looked ridiculous. It added nearly a ton of weight to the front of the tank, stressing the transmission and suspension. But the tankers swore it worked. The ordnance officers were skeptical. They ran tests. A Panzerfaust fired directly against the side of a Sherman with sandbags blew the sandbags away and penetrated the armor underneath. The sandbags offered minimal actual protection. But when the Panzerfaust was fired at an angle, simulating a realistic attack from a hedgerow position, the sandbags disrupted the shaped charge jet. Sometimes, not always. Maybe 1 time in 3. 1 in 3 is better than none. An ordnance officer writes in his report, "The psychological value of the sandbags is the greatest value actually derived. If the bags do nothing more, they are certainly a morale factor as the crews are thoroughly impressed with them." Senior commanders face a choice: ban a practice that offers minimal real protection and damages tank suspensions, or permit it because the crews believe it helps and morale matters in combat. Most commanders permit it. By September 1944, sandbag armor has evolved from individual crew initiative into organized programs. The 6th Army Group in Alsace has corps ordnance battalions design special steel baskets that hold sandbags in place. 3 tons of sandbags per tank. The crews call them mobile bunkers. The 9th Army develops a different approach. They weld spare track blocks to the glacis plate, then add a layer of sandbags, then wrap the whole thing in artillery camouflage netting to hold it in place. It's crude. It looks terrible. But in laboratory tests decades later, military historians will realize this layered armor bears a primitive resemblance to modern composite armor, multiple materials disrupting penetrators through different mechanisms. The 12th Armored Division, still not convinced about sandbags, tries concrete. They weld steel reinforcing rods to the hull, attach wire mesh, pour concrete into wooden forms, create a rigid protective shell. Does it work? Testing is inconclusive, but it makes the crews feel safer. General Patton bans sandbags in his 3rd Army during summer 1944. His ordnance officers convince him the weight damages the tanks. Patton issues a direct order: no sandbag armor. Then comes the Battle of the Bulge. The Sherman's vulnerability is undeniable. Patton's tankers are screaming for better protection. Patton reverses course, but he demands a real solution, not sandbags. His ordnance officers provide one: weld actual armor plate onto the tanks. Source material: the battlefield graveyards. This is American pragmatism at its finest. Problem identified, solution developed locally, implementation immediate, no waiting for approval from Washington. No waiting for factory-produced kits, just get it done. The 9th Army improves duckbill track extensions in Belgian foundries because there aren't enough being shipped from the United States. Thousands of extended end connectors cast in civilian factories. The 3rd Army welds armor in Belgian workshops because ordnance battalions can't handle the workload. Individual units develop specific modifications for specific problems. Better machine gun mounts, telephone systems so infantry can communicate with tank crews without exposing themselves, reinforced hatches, camouflage schemes. This kind of rapid innovation is possible because of 3 factors. First, the Sherman is simple enough that modifications can be made with standard tools and civilian facilities. The German Panther is too complex, too precisely engineered. Modifications risk disrupting its already fragile reliability. Second, the American logistics system provides abundant materials, spare parts, steel plate, welding equipment. The Germans are scraping for every resource. Third, American doctrine encourages initiative. Junior officers and NCOs are expected to solve problems. German doctrine emphasizes following orders from above. The Sherman isn't just a tank, it's a platform, a foundation onto which crews, units, and ordnance battalions add whatever they need to survive and win. This adaptability is going to prove decisive at Arracourt, September 19, 1944. 4:13 p.m., the same battlefield where we started. Oberfeldwebel Hans Becker is starting to understand. His Panther has been in combat for 6 hours. 3 confirmed Sherman kills this afternoon, 8 more yesterday. His company has been decimating American armor for 3 days straight. But the Americans keep coming. Becker's company started the battle with 18 operational Panthers. They've lost 3. 2 to mechanical failure, 1 to a flanking shot that penetrated the thinner side armor. 15 Panthers remain. Against them, the U.S. 4th Armored Division. Becker doesn't know the full story of the 4th Armored, doesn't know their Shermans were built in late 1942 and early 1943, ancient by tank standards, doesn't know the odometers read over 1,000 miles. Distance that should have crippled the transmissions. Distance that would have destroyed his Panther twice over. But those Shermans keep running. They're mechanically sound, abundant spare parts, skilled battalion mechanics, crews who know their vehicles intimately. More importantly, the 4th Armored has been fighting since Normandy. These aren't green troops. They've learned every trick. How to use terrain, how to maneuver, how to concentrate fire, how to survive against superior German armor by being faster, smarter, more aggressive. The Battle of Arracourt isn't a single engagement. It's a series of running fights across 2 weeks. The Germans attack, the Americans counterattack. Neither side achieves a decisive breakthrough. But the math is working against Becker. Every morning, German strength decreases, Panthers lost to enemy fire, Panthers broken down from mechanical failure, Panthers abandoned when recovery isn't possible. Every morning, American strength remains roughly constant. Yes, they lose tanks, but those tanks are replaced from depots, from repair facilities, from the ordnance collecting points where Sergeant Torres and his teams work through the night. On September 23rd, Becker's company reports to headquarters, 11 operational Panthers remaining. On September 25th, 8 operational Panthers. On September 27th, 5 operational Panthers. The Americans? They still have multiple companies in the field. Exact strength unknown, but reconnaissance consistently reports 30 to 40 Shermans. Becker finally understands what he's facing. It's not that the Americans have better tanks. His Panther is superior in almost every measurable way. Better armor, better gun, better optics. But the Americans have something more important: sustainability. They can lose, they can take casualties, they can retreat from a battlefield leaving burning tanks behind. And the next morning they're back at full strength. The Germans can win tactical victories, and Becker's unit has won several in the Arracourt fighting. But each victory costs Panthers they cannot replace. Each loss is permanent. A captured German tanker, interviewed after Arracourt, provides the clearest assessment. We could destroy their tanks. They could replace them. It was never a fair fight, just not in the way we thought. The Battle of Arracourt grinds on through the end of September. The Germans commit 6 panzer brigades, their carefully hoarded reserve meant to be the spearhead of a major counteroffensive. Those brigades are destroyed piecemeal, not in a single climactic battle, but through steady attrition. The Americans wear them down, kill their tanks, force retreats, pursue, kill more tanks. By the time the fighting ends, Hitler's counteroffensive has failed before it truly began. The Panzer Reserve is gone. Wasted. The 4th Armored Division continues operations with minimal interruption. But Arracourt is just the preview. The true test comes 3 months later in the frozen Ardennes forest during Germany's last desperate gamble, December 16, 1944. 5:30 a.m., Belgian-German border. The German artillery barrage announces Hitler's final offensive. Wacht am Rhein, watch on the Rhine. The Germans call it that. The Americans will call it the Battle of the Bulge. Germany has scraped together its last reserves for this attack. 2 full panzer armies, approximately 1,900 tanks and assault guns, including 415 Panthers and 180 King Tigers. Germany's heaviest tank, even more formidable than the Panther. This is the strongest armored force Germany has fielded in the West since Normandy. It represents a staggering effort. Tanks pulled from the Eastern Front, rebuilt vehicles from depots. New production rushed forward, experienced crews supplemented by inexperienced replacements. Every gallon of precious fuel hoarded for this offensive. The goal: drive through the thinly held Ardennes sector, cross the Meuse River, capture Antwerp, split the Allied armies. On paper, it's ambitious but achievable. The Allies are stretched thin. The weather is terrible. Fog and snow that will ground Allied air power. The Germans have local numerical superiority and the advantage of surprise. What Hitler doesn't account for is the resilience gap. The Americans are initially stunned. German spearheads punch through the defensive lines. Entire units are encircled. Bastogne is surrounded. Kampfgruppe Piper, the 1st SS Panzer Division's spearhead, drives deep into American territory. But the American system responds with remarkable speed. Reinforcements flood into the Ardennes. Entire divisions change direction mid-movement. Patton's 3rd Army pivots 90 degrees north, a maneuver that astounds military historians, redirecting an entire army in 48 hours. And the tanks keep coming. The 2nd Armored Division moves into blocking positions north of the Bulge. The 3rd Armored Division contests every village, every crossroad. The 4th Armored Division, the same unit that bloodied the Germans at Arracourt, drives toward Bastogne to break the encirclement. The fighting is brutal. The weather is atrocious. American tank losses mount. But here's the difference. By the end of December, the Germans have lost approximately 730 tanks and assault guns. 45% of their starting force. Gone. Of the Panthers specifically, 180 destroyed, 130 broken down but in German hands, 105 operational. Only a quarter of the original force still running. German commanders report that half the losses are from abandonment or mechanical failure. Not enemy fire. Their own tanks betray them. The U.S. First Army, which absorbed the brunt of the German assault, loses approximately 320 Shermans. 25% of its average monthly strength. But by the end of December, First Army has 1,085 Shermans on hand, with 980 operational. Only 9% are deadlined for repairs or battle damage. The Americans have lost fewer tanks than the Germans, but more importantly, they've replaced their losses and then some. The resilience gap becomes a chasm. Kampfgruppe Piper, the spearhead that drove deepest into American lines, gets trapped at La Glaise. Not destroyed by overwhelming force, but isolated. Cut off from fuel supplies, no reinforcements, no recovery vehicles, no spare parts. The Americans bring up a scratch unit, the 740th Tank Battalion. This unit has an unusual history. It was being converted from a secret night-fighting tank battalion into a mine-clearing unit when the Bulge began. In the chaos, it's converted into a regular tank battalion. Its equipment is a hodgepodge. British Shermans from depot, a few M36 tank destroyers, even one liberated M24 Chaffee light tank. They also acquire a 155mm self-propelled gun. At L'Église, they position this gun and bombard Piper's position at point-blank range. The psychological effect is devastating. Piper's men have been cut off for days. No fuel, no food, no hope of relief. They abandon their tanks, including multiple Panthers and King Tigers, and escape on foot, not destroyed, abandoned. This is the pattern repeated across the Ardennes. German tanks run out of fuel, run out of spare parts, break down from mechanical failure, get isolated when American counterattacks cut their supply lines. They're abandoned by their crews because recovery is impossible. Meanwhile, American tanks that are knocked out in the morning are often repaired and back in action by evening. The ordnance battalions work around the clock. Mobile workshops move forward to stay close to the fighting units. Spare parts flow from depots. Damaged tanks are triaged with ruthless efficiency, repair, rebuild, or cannibalize. General Paul Hauser, captured after the war, provides the German perspective. My impression is that availability was affected more by mechanical unserviceability than by battle losses. During long movements to the battle area, 20 to 30% of all tanks fall out due to mechanical failures. Regarding the remaining tanks, 15% are lost through mechanical failures in combat. Translation: German tanks are defeating themselves. By early January 1945, Hitler's offensive has collapsed. The Ardennes bulge is being squeezed from north and south. German units retreat in disorder, abandoning equipment they cannot recover. The Americans pursue. Their Shermans, battered but functional, keep rolling forward. February 12, 1945, Belgian factory near Bastogne. 3:47 p.m. The Sherman rolls out of the work bay with fresh armor plate welded to its glacis. The paint is still scorched from yesterday's fire. The serial number is visible on the turret 347289. Lieutenant Marcus Webb recognizes it immediately. "That's Henderson's tank," he says to the ordnance captain supervising the work. "Took a hit yesterday morning outside Houffalize. I saw it burning." The captain checks his clipboard. "Penetration through the sponson, ammunition fire. Crew bailed out safely, all 5 accounted for. We recovered the hull by 1400 hours yesterday, assessed the damage. Cut out the destroyed sections. Welded in replacement plate from a knocked-out M4 we stripped last week. Installed a new ammunition rack. Replaced 1 road wheel. Tested all systems. It's ready." Webb does the math. 26 hours from knocked out to combat. Ready? 28, actually. We had to wait for a replacement road wheel. Otherwise, it would have been faster. Webb shakes his head in disbelief. Henderson's crew is getting a replacement tank from the depot tomorrow. Then this one goes to another crew. Or we keep it as a spare. Either way, it's back in the fight. This is the American system at its peak, perfected through months of combat, streamlined through brutal experience. By February 1945, the Third Army's armor upgrade program is running at full capacity. 3 Belgian factories working in shifts. Approximately 9 tanks per day receiving additional armor. Crews rotating through as space becomes available. The armor plate comes from everywhere. Knocked out German Panthers, abandoned PWIVs, American Shermans too damaged to repair but with salvageable armor. Even some field fortification steel that's been liberated from Siegfried Line bunkers. Belgian welders have become expert at this work. They can attach glacis armor in 6 hours. Turret armor takes longer, 8 to 10 hours, because of the curved surfaces and need for precision. But it's not just armor. The Third Army workshops are installing additional machine guns on tanks. The tankers want heavier coaxial armament. They liberate .50 caliber aircraft machine guns and mount them in place of the standard .30 caliber. More firepower against German infantry armed with Panzerfausts. They're also repositioning the external 50 caliber machine gun. The new M4A3s have the pintle mount behind the commander's position, which is nearly useless in combat. Ordnance welders move it forward where the commander can actually fire it without exposing himself. Field telephones are being installed on the rear hulls. This allows accompanying infantry to communicate with tank crews without climbing on the tank or using hand signals. Simple innovation, massive improvement in coordination. Every single modification happens locally. No waiting for official approval. No requisition forms sent to Washington. Just identify the problem, develop the solution, implement it immediately. The Germans have nothing comparable. Their tanks are too complex for field modifications, their logistics too strained to provide materials, their doctrine too rigid to encourage initiative. But the real advantage, the one that defines everything else, remains the repair and recovery system. February 26, 1945. Near Elsdorf, Germany, the first T-26E3 Pershing heavy tank to see combat is knocked out by a Tiger Y in a night ambush. 2 crewmen are killed. The tank is badly damaged. Within hours, it's recovered. Ordnance assesses the damage. The penetration destroyed the turret basket and killed the loader and gunner, but the main systems are intact. Engine functional. Transmission functional. Suspension functional. Ordnance installs a replacement turret basket. Repairs the damage. Tests all systems. 3 days later, the same tank is back in action with a new crew. Even the Pershing, America's answer to the Panther and Tiger with thicker armor and a powerful 90mm gun, proves the same point. Repairability matters more than raw combat power. The Pershing is a good tank, better armor than the Sherman, better gun, roughly equal to the Panther in most respects, superior in some. But only a handful reach Europe before the war ends, 20 in January, more in February and March. By war's end, fewer than 200 Pershings have seen combat. The Sherman remains the backbone, over 5,000 in the European theater, and that number holds remarkably steady despite continuous combat, because the system keeps them running. March 7, 1945, Remagen Bridge, Rhine River. The Americans capture an intact bridge across the Rhine. German demolition charges fail to destroy it completely. Units pour across before the Germans can react. Shermans lead the way. Some of these tanks have been in continuous combat since Normandy. 9 months of fighting, thousands of miles, countless engagements. They've been hit, repaired, hit again, repaired again. They're still running. A German panzer commander captured during the Rhine crossing is interviewed by American intelligence. The officer, a veteran of 3 years on the Eastern Front and 6 months in the West, provides a brutally honest assessment. Your Sherman is inferior to our Panther in gun and armor, but you have so many and they never seem to stop. We destroy them and the next day more arrive. Our own tanks break down and we must abandon them. Your system is better than our tanks. That's the verdict of industrial warfare, not the tank that wins the duel, the system that wins the campaign. April 1945, across Germany, German resistance is collapsing, not from lack of will, many units fight with desperate tenacity, but from lack of capability. The Wehrmacht has run out of fuel, run out of ammunition, run out of spare parts, run out of everything except courage, and courage alone cannot keep tanks running. German tank units report to headquarters with half their strength deadlined from mechanical problems. No parts to fix them, no recovery vehicles to retrieve them, no depot facilities that haven't been bombed into rubble or overrun. They're fighting with what they have until it breaks. Then they abandon it and retreat on foot. The Americans roll forward with barely a pause. Their Shermans are supported by a logistics train that stretches from Normandy beaches to the Rhine and beyond. Fuel trucks, ammunition trucks, spare parts, ordnance battalions, mobile workshops, recovery vehicles. Everything needed to keep an army moving. By late April, German organized resistance in the West has effectively ended. Individual units fight on, strong points hold out, but the Wehrmacht as a coherent fighting force is broken. The Shermans roll through German cities, past burning Panthers abandoned by their crews, past King Tigers that ran out of fuel and were destroyed in Nazi place, past assault guns that threw tracks and couldn't be recovered. The German graveyards are real, permanent, final. The American graveyards are temporary, way stations, places where wounded machines are healed and returned to battle. That's the difference. May 8, 1945, VE Day, war in Europe ends. The final accounting begins immediately. Total Sherman production, 49,234 tanks, including 33,671 with 75mm guns, 10,083 with 76mm guns, 4,680 with 105mm howitzers. Of these, 22,098, 45% are shipped to other armies via Lend-Lease. The British receive 70,184 Shermans. The Soviets receive 4,102. Free French, Polish, and other Allied forces receive the remainder. The Sherman equips American, British, Canadian, French, Polish, and Soviet armored units. It fights in North Africa, Italy, France, Germany, the Philippines, and on Pacific Islands. It serves in deserts, mountains, bocage country, cities, and jungles. It is not the best tank of World War II by any single metric. German Panthers have better armor and guns. Soviet T-34s have better mobility and sloped armor. British Churchills have better armor for infantry support. But the Sherman is good enough to do its job, good enough to be built in massive numbers, good enough to be shipped across oceans, good enough to be maintained far from factories, good enough to be repaired after damage, good enough to be modified for specific missions, good enough to win. Post-war, the analysts write their reports, the historians compile their studies, the veterans tell their stories. One narrative emerges again and again. The Germans had superior individual tanks. The Americans had the superior system. The Chrysler Corporation, which built thousands of Shermans during the war, captures this in their official history. Our tanks were better because the Germans never learned to think in terms of reliability as we use the word. That is, maximum performance with minimum care and replacement. A weakness for technical prowess at the expense of dependability, simplicity, and cost is shared by many American engineers. But in this practical nation, the engineer is disciplined by the production man and the salesman. General Leslie McNair's insistence on battleworthiness, the doctrine that drove Sherman development, is vindicated by battlefield results. Durability proved more valuable than raw power. Reliability proved more valuable than technical sophistication. A tank that runs is worth 10 tanks that don't. A tank that can be repaired is worth 10 tanks that must be abandoned. A tank that can be built by the thousands is worth 10 technological marvels built in hundreds. The Germans understood this too late. Maybe they understood it all along but couldn't change. Their industrial base was smaller. Their resources more limited. Their doctrine more focused on individual weapon quality. They built the Panther, an engineering achievement genuinely impressive in many ways. But the Panther's complexity worked against it. The Wehrmacht couldn't produce enough, couldn't keep them running, couldn't recover and repair them effectively. They built the Tiger, even more powerful, even more complex, even more impossible to sustain in large numbers. They built the King Tiger, absurdly heavy, absurdly expensive, breaking down under its own weight. Each generation sought the perfect tank. Each generation built something that looked perfect on paper. And each generation missed the fundamental lesson of industrial warfare. The perfect weapon you cannot sustain is inferior to the adequate weapon you can field in abundance. Somewhere in Germany, May 1945, Oberfeldwebel Hans Becker survives the war. surrenders to American forces in the war's final days, sits in a POW camp and tries to understand what happened. His Panther was superior. Everyone knew it. The Americans knew it. Their tankers feared the Panther throughout the war. The technical specifications proved it. But technical specifications didn't account for the Sherman destroyed in the morning that was back in action by afternoon. Didn't account for the American ordnance system that turned graveyards into resurrection points. Didn't account for the logistics that kept thousands of tanks running simultaneously. Becker thinks about Arracourt, about destroying Shermans day after day, watching his own force dwindle while the Americans maintained strength. About the slow realization that he was losing a war of attrition his side could never win. The Americans didn't beat the Panther in combat, not directly. They built a system that made the Panther's advantages irrelevant. Superior gun doesn't matter if the destroyed Sherman is replaced by tomorrow. Superior armor doesn't matter if your own tank breaks down before reaching the battle. Superior optics doesn't matter if you're outnumbered 10-1. The Americans won by making tank combat sustainable, by building machines that worked, by creating a repair system that kept them working, by establishing a production system that built them faster than they could be destroyed, by understanding that modern war isn't about the best weapon, it's about the best system. 1946. Ford Willow Run Plant, Michigan. The factory that built B-24 bombers during the war sits empty. The assembly lines are silent. The workers have gone home to peacetime jobs. In the parking lot, rows of Sherman tanks await their fate. Some will be sold to allied nations rebuilding their militaries. Some will be converted to recovery vehicles or engineering equipment. Some will be scrapped for steel. They look outdated already. The war has been over less than a year and military planners are already designing the next generation. Tanks with better armor, better guns, better everything. But these Shermans, battered, worn, still bearing the scars of combat, proved something fundamental about modern warfare. In the end, the graveyard wasn't where the German tankers thought it was. The real graveyard was the battlefield where Panthers sat abandoned because no one could recover them, where King Tigers were blown up by their own crews because fuel trucks couldn't reach them, where assault guns lay broken because spare parts didn't exist. The real graveyard was the production targets Germany could never meet, the operational readiness rates they could never achieve, the maintenance systems they could never build. The Americans built graveyards too. Ordnance collecting points, repair depots, salvage yards. But those graveyards gave birth to new life. Wounded tanks healed, damaged hulls rebuilt, knocked out wrecks turned into armor plate for their brothers. The Belgian factory near Bastogne that upgraded Third Army Shermans processed 9 tanks per day through February and March 1945. 6 to 8 hours per tank. Damaged in the morning, armored by evening. Back in action the next day. 8 hours from wreck to warrior. That's not a legend. That's not propaganda. That's logistics. That's industrial warfare. That's what happens when you build a system instead of just building weapons. The Sherman was not the best tank of World War II, but it was good enough. And in the end, good enough. In sufficient numbers, with proper support, sustained by an unbreakable logistics chain, beats perfect every time. The lesson echoes across every war since. In combat, the tank that works is better than the tank that doesn't. The tank that can be fixed is better than the tank that can't. The tank that exists in abundance is better than the tank that exists in scarcity. The Germans dismissed the Sherman's armor, called it a Ronson lighter. Lights first time, every time. They were right about the armor, wrong about what mattered. Because while they were building engineering marvels that broke down, the Americans were building workhorses that kept running. While they were obsessing over technical specifications, the Americans were perfecting the system that kept tanks in the fight. While they were winning duels, the Americans were winning the war. And when the smoke cleared and the historians tallied the final score, they found that most of the burning hulks scattered across Europe wore German markings. The graveyards tell the story, not of which tank was better, but of which system could sustain a modern industrial war. The answer rolled off the assembly lines in Detroit, crossed the Atlantic in convoy ships, fought from Normandy to Berlin, got knocked out, recovered, repaired, and fought again. 49,000 times, that's the number that mattered. Not the thickness of the armor, not the length of the gun, not the technical specifications in the manual. Just the simple fact that when you destroyed one, there was another to take its place, and another, and another. Until Germany ran out of Panthers, ran out of fuel, ran out of spare parts, ran out of hope. The Sherman kept rolling. Good enough.